So Lance, a lot of instructional designers like myself want to get into data analytics more and be able to use data analytics in our day to day. And it's daunting for a lot of us. We're not sure how to get started or what to, should we learn Python? Should we learn SQL? Should we stick with Excel? So could you give us a little bit of your thoughts on how one might get into data analytics?
Sure. And let me start off just by asking, like, with the instructional analysis, are you looking to look at your courses? Like, what do you want to measure?
Right. So my thinking on it is I want to be the kind of instructional designer. I kind of think of it as EDA, evaluation, design, and analytics. So instead of just designing courses, I would like to be the kind of designer who can sit down with the people I'm going to make a course with, figure out some kind of evaluation process that we can use to test the effectiveness of this course or training program. Figure that out ahead of time. How are we going to measure and evaluate this course? Then do the actual designing of the course, but then be able to gather information and use data analytics to analyze the effectiveness of this course. How effective was it? And what could we do maybe next time to iterate to make it more effective, but to be able to have enough analytics skills to analyze the evaluation data that I set up beforehand around the course. So I think the
Okay.
days of just building courses is, I think if you want to really be tops in this game, you're going to have to weave in data analytics and be uh, fluent with those kind of things. What do you think? Does that make sense?
Wow. Yeah, no, it does. And it sounds like it's kind of crossing against maybe two domains. On one hand, a lot of what you're describing is like assessment design.
Yeah.
And when you're researching educational impact, educational efficacy, and in many cases, product impact, product efficacy, that's an assessment that can be both qualitative and quantitative. What's effective in a course, partially it's engaging. Are you
Right.
keeping people's interest? Are you inspiring them? Are you getting them to want to do something or apply what they're learning? And the other hand, it's maybe skill measurement,
Right.
knowledge measurement. Did they retain the information that you gave them? Are they now able to take action with it effectively?
Right.
So a lot of that comes down to, on one hand, designing the assessments.
Mhm.
The better design the assessment and the more targeted it is, the more you're really going to be able to measure efficacy on a skill set, on an ability, on kind of a type of knowledge retention. And then secondarily, data analysis over time. Yes, you could get into what I would consider data analysis in the more statistical, quantitative sense. But if we're talking about like one person running classes, I don't see a need for deep statistics. I
Right.
don't see a need for multivariate analysis or cluster analysis, the kinds of which you're going to want for really complex behavioral analysis of big products with big data sets.
Right.
Um, so at the scale you're talking about, Excel's great.
Right.
And a lot of simple correlational measures, a lot of averaging, looking at standard deviations, a lot of the core ones that we grew up with are still going to be as effective for the majority of it.
Mhm.
And I would say I would seek out innovation in the assessment design, like the types of survey questions you ask at the end of the class, the ways you observe interactions of people, like attendance can be a great measure of engagement at the college level when people have the freedom of not always going to class. If there's no quiz that day or something, do they attend? How interactive are they being? Are they raising their hand? Are they not? There's a lot of ways of coming up with things you can count that are kind of qualitative, but indirectly indicating interest, satisfaction, in addition to the ways that you can kind of quiz and measure those things. But yes, Excel. Excel's great.
Great.
I'm going to say no to Python in this case, but Python is a great language for automating large data analysis in a batch-based way. Some data analysis takes a long time. You can't sit there and do it in a program like SPSS or R. You're going to have to program jobs that are going to take hours to run and can be automatically scheduled. That's when Python's going to be a lot more interesting. You might be using something like Snowflake. It's a big enterprise data aggregator that can pull data from AWS, Microsoft's, you know, data repositories and other things, and then can take data from different sources. You can analyze it. You can come up with aggregate measures where, like, with a lot of data analysis, it's taking the raw data, making averages and measures on top of that, and then doing something with your summarized kind of data.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a direction to go in the bigger scale data analysis, but it's a spectrum, and
Right.
start simple. That's
Yeah,
my advice. Start simple.
thank you. I am with Excel, and I think there is a lot to there's a lot that there's a lot on the more basic level that some designers like us can really utilize. So,
Yep.
like you said, do a little bit more on the side of evaluation and assessment. Try to figure out how you're going to assess this training program or course you're making ahead of time, I think. Then, of
Yep.
course, the design part, bring in the learning sciences, bring in good curricular design, bring in good aesthetic design. There's a lot there too. And then with maybe perhaps a entry level understanding of statistics and Excel together, using statistical analysis using Excel might be enough. And when I say enough, that's a lot. I know
Yeah.
it's a ton, because there are people who just do assessments. All they do is assessment. There are people who
Yes.
only do data analytics, or all they do is course design. So I know that it's a lot. But my thinking is, if you could figure out how to tie those three together, even at a sort of entry level,
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing it more holistically. You're seeing why you would build it, and how to measure it, and all that kind of would come together, I think, with those three skills. And so that's my aim. And
Mm-hmm.
it's good to hear that I'm on the right track with statistical analysis with Excel, and a better understanding of assessment strategies might be the way to blend those three together. So thank you.
And I'll offer some tips and some tools that might be fun to check out.
Please.
Um, Tableau, Mixed Panel, and Amplitude are three online services that are really great for presentation of data.
Mhm.
They're often used for kind of like product analysis,
Right.
but they could be repurposed from an educational evaluation as well.
Mhm.
Um, and they're kind of industry standard tools where if you want to sell your data analysis
Mhm.
skills, they are some popular things to be familiar with. And then also, just from kind of like the empirical perspective, how do you do good research?
Right.
And with data, you got to keep in mind that as you start to get more sophisticated, as you say, run the same class over and over and over again, you can now compare the success of one version of the class with another. You're going to want to use some of that historic data as a benchmark.
Mhm.
You can compare to past classes with pre and post change, kind of like the idea of A/B testing. If you can be relatively consistent in your delivery of a class, you can now say, well, here's what happened in the class before I made some major change to the pedagogy, the curriculum, and after. Another thing you can do is you can do a little bit of like a pre-assessment with your students to understand how much prior knowledge or experience do they bring to the class to begin with. Because in cases where you, for whatever reason, have some students who are a little more sophisticated or less, that could throw off your data. And if you have a pre-assessment, you can identify if and when someone is bringing more or less to the class. And then post hoc or not post hoc analysis, but after you collect all your data, you can adjust for that. So that allows you to understand when the students may be shifting the results of your data analysis, especially when you're dealing with small data sets where one or two individuals can have a big effect
Yeah.
on the measures.
Thank you, Lance.
Yeah.
So much to learn, but at the same time, it makes sense to do it in a sort of threefold way, because if I just see developing those together could just make you have a better understanding of the whole picture instead of just course design. you know, I mean, just building courses. So thank you. I appreciate the advice.
Yeah, absolutely.